You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is David Smith. He's the senior analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. Welcome to the show, David.
Good to be back, Jim.
Well, the U.S. Fed last week made what I called a non-announcement. They didn't do anything. That spurred the markets momentarily, but now what's the state? People are saying they sent both a bull and a bear message. Where do we sit, David?
Well, in the market, there's always two sides. There's the bulls and the bears, and at some point in a given time, one side is stronger than the other. Last week, it was actually the day you and I spoke. The Fed announced, as you mentioned, that they weren't going to cut back on the money they put in to try to stimulate the economy, and the market had been declining for a week prior to that on the assumption that they would. So we had one of the biggest one-day rises in gold in several years. The gold stocks put on record volume day in terms of the several of the indices. And now, in the last few days, we've seen an awful lot of that given back, and people are discouraged again. The bulls are thinking that, well, we're going to see new lows. And so I think that if a person still believes in the bullish case, which I do, it's important to realize constantly that you have to do the opposite of what most people think is going to happen. And so, for example, on that day, before the announcement, the day that you and I talked, I purchased a couple of mining stocks at very good prices, and I bought a silver ETF when silver was down 49 cents on the day, and by the end of the day it was up almost $1.50. And I certainly felt better buying 49 cents lower than $1.50 higher. And I haven't done anything since then, and I'm not going to do anything until we have this resolved, what some people call get-nowhere prices, between the highs of a couple of weeks ago and the lows of last Wednesday. So we just see how things play out. It hasn't changed my view on what I believe is going to happen, and as the Canadians would say, it's written in the rocks. That's what I feel about the bullish case for the precious metals. And I'm not going to be swayed by every time J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs says something which is talking in their book and then cause me to change my mind based upon people who've never had my interest at heart in the first place.
One of your pieces of advice, in fact, that we talked about was don't pay attention to what the big players are doing because they're just playing you.
That's really true. Whether it's George Soros or any of the other big houses, usually when an article comes out about what they've done, it's something they did several weeks before. So we're interested in our own portfolios, and we can't try to piggyback onto what they're doing and expect to have anything. And so the idea is to establish your core positions, decide the ones that you really like, and then don't keep adding to it just to have some market activity. If there's a compelling reason for you to buy some more of something, then do that. And for me, it's a quality company that's trading at a price that I think is ridiculously low. One of the companies that I bought at $9 rose to $16.50 over the last few months, and now it's trading around $12. I'm not going to add any more to that company unless it gets down to 10. I'm not going to buy at $12.50 thinking that somehow my behavior will influence the market, because it won't. It'll just deprive me of more capital that I might be able to spend if I get a price that is really, really low once again.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. My guest is David Smith. We'll be back right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
Welcome back. We're chatting with David Smith. You feel it's important for people to still stick to that old fundamental thing, have a core position, and stick to it.
It really is true, and I would use a quote that I love from Stu Thompson in Graceland Updates. He says, direct quote, "Only losers try to trade their way through a bull market with core positions. They end up at the end of the bull with nothing. Winners grip core positions tighter in corrections and add to positions." And so this is what I believe you need to do. If you have the money to add more and the reasons are compelling, you do so. If you don't, you sit there. And so you stay in the present and you focus on what's going on now in your life by strengthening your relationships, by going to the gym, by eating properly, by getting enough sleep. And remember that we all want to see much higher prices for the metals, and I believe we will. But all the time that it's going to take to get there will never come back to us. So let's live in the moment while planning for the future and avoid that King Midas curse, where King Midas got to the point that he was so entranced with getting gold that even when he touched his own daughter and she turned to gold, he was only mildly upset about the whole thing. So focus on that golden ring, so to speak, but don't let it dominate your life to the point that you can't feel that you live until you get there. Because I guarantee that when you do get there, you're going to realize it wasn't worth the price you had to pay.
Do you expect India or China to make another one of those moves where, remember when gold had that tremendous drop over the weekend? That was because the big players decided to dump gold to see if they could get the price to fall so they could buy it all back again at a lower price. Are we going to see something like that again, or do you just have to hope it doesn't happen?
Well, the dumping of the gold was done primarily by Western entities, and the purchasing of that gold, all indications are that it was done primarily by Asian entities. So if the price were to drop again, I would expect to see very strong physical buying by the Indians and the Chinese, and by those in the West that are smart enough to know that the longer term is still intact. And what you do, you buy declines, and you hang on when prices go up, and you sell lightly when prices go up very strongly.
I heard that China is buying so much gold that by the end of the year, they'll be the biggest holders of physical gold in the world.
Well, they may be a few years away from that, at least assuming that the United States has all the gold in Fort Knox that they say they do. But certainly China is going to become a force to be reckoned with. And if you look at the Russian purchases, I just looked at a chart yesterday on that. Virtually every month for the last several years, they've added judiciously to their gold holdings. And they are pretty transparent about what they're doing. The Chinese are much less so. But both of these countries are establishing more and more of what for thousands of years has been real money. And when the day comes that confidence evaporates from our markets globally with all the things that are going on, there's going to be a rush into gold and silver that's going to be pretty amazing. And I think people that get shaken out with what's going on now and lose faith, and I understand that because it's been a hard couple of years, but if they get shaken out and lose their will, and prices go where I believe they're going to be pretty dissatisfied. And things are so unpredictable that we can't predict from minute to minute, let alone from hour to hour. But the major trend always reasserts itself, and I abide by a four-letter phrase that the late Stanley Kroll, who was a very successful commodities trader, said about establishing those positions. He said, be right and sit tight. And that's what I intend to do, and I hope that our listeners will feel like that's in their best interest to do the same as well.
Thanks a lot, David. My guest has been David Smith. He's the senior analyst for the Morgan Report, which you can find online at silver-investor.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. You can contact us at info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.